The air in the Denver mortgage office was sterile, thick with the scent of industrial-grade coffee and the low, constant hum of computer towers. Across the vast mahogany desk, the closing agent, a woman with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, pushed a mountain of paperwork toward me. "Clara Hayes," she announced, her voice a little too loud for the hushed room. "Congratulations on becoming a homeowner." I looked past her, toward the waiting area with its rows of sterile, gray chairs. They were all empty. No proud parents, no cheering sibling, not even a friend to snap a photo. It was just me. My coworker, Brianna, who had offered to drive me, stepped forward and took a quick, awkward picture with her phone. "Where's the welcome wagon? Stuck in traffic?" she asked, her attempt at levity falling flat. I managed a weak smile and a nod. "Yeah, something like that. You know how it is." That evening, the silence of my new, empty apartment was deafening. I dropped my keys on the granite countertop, the clatter echoing in the cavernous space. I pulled out my phone, a nervous habit, and saw a message from my father. My heart did a familiar little flip-flop, a mix of hope and dread. The hope died instantly. The message wasn't one of congratulations. It wasn't even a question about how the closing went. It was a command. Send $45,000. Leo needs to buy that new Bronco. We can't have him falling behind you. I read the words once, twice, a third time. Not a please. Not a could you help? Just a demand, as if my monumental achievement was nothing more than an inconvenient reminder that his golden boy was being outshone. A cold, quiet rage, an emotion I had suppressed for 2 decades, began to uncoil in my stomach. I opened my banking app, my fingers moving with a strange new precision. I initiated a transfer to my father's account for exactly $1.00. In the memo line, I typed 2 words, "for gas." I hit send. As the confirmation flashed on the screen, a tectonic plate shifted deep inside me. The foundation of my life, built on sacrifice and silent compliance, had just cracked. Without a second thought, I found the number for a 24-hour locksmith. As I watched him work later that night, drilling into the fresh paint of my new front door, the sound was a symphony. He installed a heavy, gleaming brass deadbolt, solid, unforgiving. As it clicked shut for the first time, I knew with absolute certainty that this door, this house, this life was finally mine and mine alone. If you've ever had your biggest accomplishment ignored by the very people who should have been cheering you on, only to be hit with a demand for money, tell me your story in the comments. I want to know how many of us are out there, finally learning to lock the door. 4 nights later, the comforting scent of microwaved pizza was interrupted by the jarring sight of red and blue lights strobing through my living room blinds. The microwave's final beep was still echoing when a heavy, insistent knock rattled my new door. My heart leaped into my throat. I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. 2 police officers stood in the brightly lit hallway. One was speaking into his radio, his voice a low murmur, while the other held a small notepad. I took a deep breath, slid the chain lock into place, and opened the door a few inches. "Good evening, ma'am," the taller officer said, his badge glinting under the harsh fluorescent light. "We received a call expressing concern for your welfare. It came from your father, a Mr. Richard Hayes. He reported that you'd changed your locks and weren't answering his calls." I felt a laugh, bitter and sharp, bubble up inside me, but I forced it down. I unhooked the chain and swung the door open. "Please, come in." The apartment still smelled of cardboard boxes and leftover pizza. I gestured vaguely around the clean, if Spartan, space. My work laptop sat on the counter next to the thick folder from my home closing. The fridge was stocked with groceries. The shorter officer's eyes swept the room, lingering for a moment on the framed offer letter from my firm, Apex Mortgage Solutions, which I'd propped up on a bookshelf. "Seems like you're doing just fine, Ms. Hayes," he said, his tone professional but not unkind. I gave a small shrug. "Just been busy, setting some new boundaries." They went through the standard list of questions. Any unusual stress? Any changes at work? Any health problems? My answers were clipped and simple. New house, demanding job. Everything's fine. The taller officer nodded slowly, making a note on his pad. Your father seemed genuinely worried, he offered. He said you might be struggling. This time, the laugh escaped. It was a short, humorless sound. He's not worried about me, I clarified. He's worried about his loss of control. As they prepared to leave, the shorter officer paused at the door, turning back to me. It happens more than you'd think, he said, his expression softening for a fraction of a second. When people feel their control slipping, they panic. The new deadbolt clicked shut behind them, a sound of profound finality. The pizza sat forgotten on the counter. The quiet that filled the room wasn't the lonely, echoing silence from a few nights before. This was a different kind of quiet. It was a stillness I had chosen, a peace I had fought for. That night's sleep was elusive. My thoughts drifted back, unbidden, to being 16 years old. I could almost smell the cloying mixture of motor oil and cheap rubber from the auto parts kiosk where I worked after school. I'd stand for hours under buzzing fluorescent lights, counting inventory, restocking shelves with spark plugs and air fresheners, forcing a smile for every customer. My feet would ache in my cheap, worn-out sneakers. Every single cent of my paycheck was deposited directly into my mother's bank account. It was for Leo's expenses, she'd say. Those expenses included the latest gaming system, designer sneakers, and that absurd electric longboard he just had to have. My father, Richard, would pat me on the back, his gesture meant to feel like praise. Family has to invest in the future, Clara, he'd say with unwavering conviction. And I, young and desperate for his approval, believed him. I thought my sweat and exhaustion were contributions to some shared family dream. I was wrong. The future, it turned out, always belonged exclusively to Leo. His expensive soccer camps always took precedence over the new textbooks I needed. The family vacation to Florida, which I couldn't go on because I had to work, was scheduled the same week as my SAT prep course. I'd come home late from a double shift, my hands smelling of grease and my body aching with fatigue, to find him sprawled on the sofa, controller in hand, completely absorbed in a video game. "Hey, thanks, sis," he'd mumble, his eyes never leaving the screen. My father never saw the grime under my fingernails or the dark circles under my eyes. He just saw the deposits in the bank account. To him, I wasn't a daughter. I was the engine that kept his golden child's life running smoothly. When I turned 18, I had managed to squirrel away just enough to enroll in community college. I took online classes at night, studying between shifts, fueled by cheap coffee and sheer will. When I told my father, he gave me another one of his performative backpats. "That's my girl. Proud of you. Just keep those checks coming. Leo's got real potential." That potential translated into private tutors, a new used car, and entry fees for motocross competitions. I kept sending the money, lying to myself that it was just for a little while longer. I graduated with honors. I landed a good job as a mortgage broker. Last month, I closed my first major deal. And with every dollar earned from overtime and missed holidays, I bought this house. My house. And nobody came. The police officer's visit played on a loop in my mind. Their calm, professional demeanor was a stark contrast to my father's manufactured panic. He hadn't called once after the closing to ask about the house. He hadn't offered to help me move. There was just silence. But the second he realized the locks were changed, the second he knew his access was cut off, I suddenly became a 5-alarm crisis. I paced the length of my new living room, my bare feet cold against the hardwood floors. For my entire life, I had measured their love in dollars and cents. I was convinced that if I just gave enough, worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, one day they would finally see me. But they never did. I was just a resource to be tapped. I stopped in the kitchen and looked at the cold, congealed slice of pizza. The silence in the apartment didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. It was the first deep breath after holding it for a lifetime. No more unexpected demands, no more guilt trips. No more being a means to someone else's end. I took a bite of the cold pizza. The sharp taste of the sauce grounded me in the here and now. Tomorrow, I would deal with whatever came next. But tonight, this space was mine. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The next morning, I was going through my daily ritual of brewing coffee and checking my credit monitoring app when my blood ran cold. A new notification glared at me from the screen, a hard inquiry from Mountain Ridge Financial, dated 3 days prior. My heart started to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I tapped on the alert. It was an auto loan application for $50,000, and listed as the co-signer was Richard Hayes, my father. I scrolled down, my vision tunneling as I read the details. The vehicle was a brand new Ford Bronco, top-of-the-line trim. The delivery was scheduled for the coming weekend at a dealership in Lakewood. The delivery address was my parents' house on Elm Street, not my new address. My coffee mug hit the counter with a loud crack, hot liquid splashing onto my hand. I barely felt it. This wasn't some clerical error. My father had taken the personal documents I'd naively left in their family safe years ago, my social security card, my birth certificate, and used them to commit fraud. I dialed the bank's fraud department, my fingers surprisingly steady even as a white-hot fury began to build inside me. A calm voice answered on the second ring. Mountain Ridge Financial, this is David. How can I help you? I gave him my name and information, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. There is an unauthorized application for an auto loan on my credit report. I could hear the click-clack of his keyboard. Yes, ma'am, I see it here. It was opened in person at our Alameda branch. The primary applicant was Leo Hayes, and the co-signer application was submitted with your ID and social security number. A Richard Hayes signed as a witness, in person. My father had walked into a bank, smiled at a loan officer, and signed my name, leveraging my hard-earned financial stability to buy his son a toy. Freeze that loan immediately, I said, my voice like ice. And I want a full digital copy of the entire application packet, every page, every signature, everything. David confirmed the account was now frozen and assured me the documents would be sent to my secure online portal within the hour. I hung up the phone, my hand now shaking uncontrollably. I looked at the pending loan details online. They'd already added optional extras: custom all-terrain tires, a premium sound system, dealer-added pinstriping, all charged against my name for a vehicle Leo hadn't lifted a finger to earn. I needed undeniable proof. Colorado is a one-party consent state for recording phone calls. I opened the voice recording app on my phone, created a new file, took a deep, centering breath, and dialed my father. He picked up on the fourth ring, the sound of a blaring TV game show in the background. About time you decided to call back, he barked, no preamble. I skipped the pleasantries. Explain the $50,000 auto loan you took out in my name, I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. There was a beat of stunned silence. Then he let out a short, dismissive huff of a laugh. Oh, that. Just helping Leo build his credit history. You're doing so great with the new house, it's time to share the wealth. You know, family helps family. The phrase hit me like a physical blow. Family helps family. My hand clenched around the phone. You committed fraud. You forged my signature. Another laugh, this one tinged with annoyance. It's an investment, Clara. He'll pay it back as soon as he gets on his feet. Stop being so dramatic. The condescension, the absolute certainty in his voice that I was the one being unreasonable, was staggering. What's mine is not yours to give away, I said, and I ended the call before he could spew another word of his twisted logic. The recording saved. 23 seconds of a crystal-clear confession. I played it back twice. His words, his tone, his utter lack of remorse, it was all there. It was my silver bullet. I transferred the audio file to my laptop, naming it Richard_confession_proof, and immediately uploaded it to a secure cloud drive. Then I logged back into the bank's portal. The document packet was waiting for me. I downloaded it and started scrolling, and there it was. A grainy photocopy of my old college driver's license, the one I'd reported lost my sophomore year. He'd kept it all this time, waiting for an opportunity. Next to it was the signature page, my name scrawled in my father's familiar, loopy handwriting. I checked the branch's timestamp. It was from Tuesday afternoon, a time when I was verifiably in back-to-back meetings across town. I printed every single page at a nearby copy shop. The stack of paper was thick, still warm from the printer. I compiled it all into a plain manila evidence folder. On the tab, in stark black marker, I wrote, "Loan fraud." It sat on my desk next to my legitimate home closing documents. 2 different worlds, built on my name, now set on a collision course. My coffee was stone cold, but I drank it down, the bitter taste a perfect match for my mood. This was no longer just about the money. It was about the breathtaking audacity, the casual, entitled belief that my life, my achievements, my very identity were just resources for them to plunder. Leo was probably somewhere right now, test driving his new Bronco in his mind, completely oblivious. I closed my laptop, the folder feeling heavy in my lap. Everything was now documented. Everything was airtight. Whatever happened next, I was no longer the pawn. For the first time in my life, I was holding all the cards. Saturday at noon, I pulled my car into the sprawling lot of the Ford dealership in Lakewood. The sun beat down on the asphalt, making the rows of brand new cars and trucks shimmer in the heat. I parked with a clear view of the entrance, the manila folder sitting on the passenger seat like a loaded weapon. I waited. 15 minutes later, my father's oversized truck rumbled into the lot. My mother was in the passenger seat, looking tense. Leo was sprawled in the back, sunglasses on, the picture of detached arrogance. They got out of the truck. My father, Richard, adjusted the collar of his polo shirt, a gesture of self-importance I knew all too well. My mother, Susan, clutched her handbag to her chest like a shield. I stepped out of my car, folder in hand. We need to talk. My father gestured toward the glass doors of the showroom. Let's go inside. It's too hot out here. I didn't move. Here is fine. Leo, leaning against the side of the truck, didn't even look up from his phone. My mother glanced nervously at the other customers milling about. Clara, this really isn't the place for this. I opened the folder anyway, pulling out the first page. The loan summary. I laid it on the hot hood of their truck. A $50,000 auto loan, in my name, sent to your address. My father's jaw clenched. It's a simple misunderstanding. We were going to pay it back. My mother chimed in, her voice quick and high-pitched. Your father only meant well, dear. Leo finally looked up, a smirk playing on his lips. Yeah, relax, it's just a truck. I ignored them both, sliding the next document onto the pile, the application page. Here is my social security number, and here is my forged signature, signed in person at the Alameda branch. My mother's face went pale. She turned to my father. Richard, you told me it was all approved. Just then, before he could concoct a lie, my phone buzzed. It was a FaceTime call from my Aunt Carol. Perfect timing. I answered and propped the phone up on my car's dashboard. Her perfectly coiffed, sun-tanned face filled the screen. Clara, honey, what's all this I hear about a family meeting in a parking lot? Your father is just so proud of Leo. The boy deserves to have nice things. I turned the phone's camera to face the document spread across the truck's hood. He's welcome to have them, I said calmly. Just not on my credit. Aunt Carol squinted at the screen. Well, that's not how it sounds. Richard, what is she talking about? My father leaned toward my phone. Carol, it's just temporary. She's being hysterical and overreacting. That was my cue. I tapped my phone and hit play on the recording. My father's voice, tinny and unmistakable, filled the air. Just helping Leo build his credit history. You're doing so great with the new house, it's time to share the wealth. You know, family helps family. A hush fell over our little corner of the parking lot. A nearby salesman, in the middle of his pitch to a young couple, trailed off. The couple stared openly. Leo's sunglasses slid down his nose. My mother's voice was a frantic whisper. "Turn it off, Clara. Turn it off now." Aunt Carol's eyes were wide with shock. "You recorded your own father?" The call ended abruptly. The screen went black. My father's face was a mask of crimson rage. "You had no right." I calmly gathered my papers. "The bank's fraud department seems to think I do. They'll be the ones deciding what's right, not you." Leo kicked at a loose piece of gravel. "You're just trying to embarrass us." As if on cue, a mechanic drove a gleaming new Bronco right past us, the engine roaring to life for a test drive. It was the exact model, the exact color. My father took a step toward me, grabbing my arm. His grip was surprisingly weak. "Think about your mother, Clara." I pulled my arm away. "I have," I said, looking directly at her. My mother's eyes were glistening with tears, but she said nothing. She had chosen her side with her silence. I slid back into my car, the folder resting securely on the seat beside me. As I reversed out of the parking spot, I saw the salesman watching me, slowly shaking his head. In my rearview mirror, their three figures grew smaller and smaller, dwarfed by the giant, fluttering flags of the dealership. The drive home was a blur. I blasted the air conditioning, the cold air doing little to cool the fire in my veins. My father's denials, my mother's silence, Leo's entitlement, my aunt's blind defense. It was the same toxic pattern that had defined my entire life. But this time was different. This time, I had the proof. At a red light, I glanced at the folder. The bank had included the security camera stills. There was my father, smiling at the teller, my old driver's license clipped to the application. He hadn't just been opportunistic, he had planned this. He had timed it perfectly with my house closing, assuming I'd be too distracted or too tired to notice. The light turned green. I pressed the accelerator, the city of Denver speeding past my window. I didn't know exactly what the fallout would be, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out. 2 weeks passed. On Instagram, Leo started a countdown. New Bronco in 24 hours. He posted, alongside a picture of him grinning next to a model on the showroom floor, keys dangling theatrically from his fingers. The post was flooded with comments from his friends, a barrage of fire emojis and celebratory messages. I watched it all unfold from the safety of my couch. The official loan cancellation notice from Mountain Ridge Financial still open on my laptop. They hadn't just frozen the loan, they had killed it. The next afternoon, I received a short professional email. The bank had completed its internal investigation and, as per standard procedure for suspected fraud, would be sending a representative, accompanied by local law enforcement, to the dealership to review the original documents and retrieve the vehicle. My presence was not required. Inside the dealership's glass-walled showroom, Leo was holding court. He stood next to his prized Bronco, arms crossed, basking in the glow of the overhead lights. A salesman was at his side, clapping him on the shoulder. My father stood a few feet away, nervously checking his watch, while my mother sat on a leather bench across the room, pretending to be absorbed in a brochure. Then the glass doors slid open. 2 uniformed police officers walked in, followed by a man in a crisp gray suit carrying a tablet. The taller officer approached the group. "Good afternoon, we're here to verify the financing on this vehicle." Leo's triumphant smile faltered. "It's all set. It's my car. We signed the papers." The bank representative tapped on his tablet. "Loan number ending in 835, correct? Primary applicant, Leo Hayes. Co-signer, Clara Hayes." He turned the tablet screen toward them. "We've found a signature mismatch on the co-signer application and a significant address discrepancy." My father stepped forward, trying to take control. "Now hold on. There's just been a small mix-up. I'm sure we can clear this right up." The officer held up a hand, stopping him. "Sir, we just need to see the original signed documents." Leo fumbled in his backpack and produced a folder of crumpled papers. The rep took them and compared them to the digital copies on his tablet. This signature on the co-signer line does not match the authorized signature we have on file for Clara Hayes. A hush began to fall over the showroom. A family with 2 small children paused to watch. Phones began to rise, their lenses pointed discreetly at the unfolding drama. My mother shot to her feet. "Officers, please, this is a private family matter." The shorter officer shook his head. "Ma'am, it became a bank matter the moment a fraudulent application was submitted. We are required to be here." My father's voice began to rise, cracking with desperation. "This is harassment. We're customers here." The bank rep read from his tablet in a clear, emotionless voice. "The application has been denied due to the use of a non-authorized co-signer and suspected identity fraud." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. A teenager filming vertically whispered excitedly to his friend. Leo's face was beet red. He jabbed a finger at the kid. "Turn that off." The salesman, seeing a PR nightmare unfolding, quickly backed away, his hands raised in surrender. "Folks, let's just take this into my office." But it was too late. "The vehicle will remain the property of the dealership until this is resolved," one of the officers stated. A tow truck, which had been waiting just out of sight, backed into the service bay. The driver hopped out, chains clanking in his hands. Leo lunged forward. "You can't take it!" My father grabbed him. "Leo, calm down." The bank rep closed his tablet. "All parties have been notified. Any further action will be handled by our legal department." A loose circle of spectators had now formed, their phones held high. The tow truck driver expertly hooked the brand new Bronco, its engine silent, and began to winch it onto the flatbed. Leo slumped against a display sign, his face buried in his hands. My mother was openly dabbing her eyes with a tissue. My father was arguing heatedly with one of the officers, his wild gestures lost in the cavernous, echoing showroom. By that evening, the videos were everywhere. "Drama at Denver dealership," one headline read. "Man's new truck repoed at delivery." The clips went viral, racking up over 100,000 views in just a few hours. Strangers screenshot Leo's triumphant countdown post and shared it with captions like, "How it started versus how it's going." By midnight, the story had been shared across every local news-focused social media group. I sat at home watching the digital firestorm unfold. Leo had deleted his Instagram account, but it was too late. The internet never forgets. From my window, I could see my father's truck parked in the driveway of their house. The house was dark. The fallout had arrived, and it was more public and more humiliating than any of them could have ever imagined. The official-looking envelope that arrived a month later felt heavy in my hands. I slid it open and spread the documents on my dining room table. Mountain Ridge Financial versus Richard Hayes. It was a civil suit. They were suing him for the full $50,000, plus another $15,000 in legal fees, court costs, and damages. The summons was for a virtual hearing at the district courthouse. My father, I saw, had filed his own response. He hadn't hired an attorney. His defense was just a few desperate, rambling paragraphs in his own cramped handwriting. On the day of the hearing, I logged into the virtual courtroom from my home office, my camera off and my microphone muted. The feed showed the judge, a stern-looking woman sitting before the state and American flags. My father appeared in a small box on the screen, looking pale and uncomfortable in an ill-fitting blazer. The bank's lawyer was clinical and efficient. The plaintiff presents, she began, a loan application with forged signatures, a recorded phone call in which the defendant admits to the act, and failed identity verification from our internal systems. She played the audio clip. My father's voice, confident and dismissive, filled the virtual courtroom, just helping Leo build his credit history. The judge leaned closer to her monitor. My father cleared his throat. "It was a private family matter, Your Honor. There was no fraudulent intent." The lawyer then presented the security camera stills of my father at the teller's window, the timestamp clearly visible. As you can see, the defendant was at the branch at a time the co-signer, his daughter, has proven she was at her place of employment across town. My father shifted uncomfortably. I was always going to cover the payments. The judge spent less than a minute reviewing the exhibits. "Judgment for the plaintiff," she declared, her voice final. "Full amount plus all associated costs." The entire hearing lasted 8 minutes. My father's video feed froze, his face a mask of disbelief. The consequences were swift and brutal. Within a week, his employer's HR department had terminated his contract, citing a clause about personal integrity and conduct. His colleagues packed his desk. Security escorted him out of the building. His badge was deactivated. There was no severance, no reference letter. Leo dropped out of his college classes. His grades had plummeted. He got a job working the night shift at a massive Amazon fulfillment center, scanning barcodes under the endless glare of fluorescent lights. His paychecks, I heard, barely covered his share of the rent for a small apartment he shared with 3 other people. My mother started working longer hours at her medical billing job, processing insurance claims late into the evening. The house on Elm Street began to look neglected. The lawn grew long and mail piled up on the porch. The bank repossessed my mother's sedan to help cover the judgment. Then, the lien was attached to their house, making it impossible to sell. My father started selling off their possessions on Facebook Marketplace. His golf clubs, Leo's old gaming systems, my mother's jewelry. I saw a final notification from the court system. The judgment was paid in full, likely from cashing out his retirement account. One evening, a plain white envelope appeared under my door. Inside, a note in my mother's cursive read, "We are so sorry, Clara. Please call when you're ready." I read it once, then fed it into my paper shredder. My life, in contrast, returned to a state of calm. No more shared accounts, no more unspoken obligations. The court file was placed in a locked drawer with my insurance documents. The long winter thawed, the roads cleared, and the distance I had created remained solid and intact. 6 months after that chaotic closing, I carried the last box into my house. It was labeled "New Start" in thick, black Sharpie. The entryway smelled of fresh paint and possibility. I set the box down and looked around at the open, sunlit space. I walked to the living room wall and, with a drill and level, mounted the old brassy deadbolt I'd had the locksmith replace. I hung my new keys on a hook right beside it. The contrast was beautiful. The aged, tarnished metal of my past next to the polished, gleaming chrome of my present. My coworker Brianna came over that night with takeout and a 6-pack of craft beer. "It's a perfect blank canvas," she said, looking around approvingly. Work was my sanctuary. I poured myself into my job at Apex, holding open houses on weekends and negotiating contracts on weekdays. I helped a young, newly married couple find a bungalow just like mine. "Thank you for making this so easy," the wife said as she signed the papers. I just smiled and handed her the pen. The first thing I did in my new life was a digital purge. I deleted every family contact from my phone: my father, my mother, Leo, Aunt Carol. I unfollowed and blocked them on every platform. My phone, once a source of constant anxiety, fell silent. The peace was palpable. Brianna insisted on throwing me a housewarming party. She invited our coworkers and some of her friends from her running club. She strung lights across the back patio, and the smell of grilling steaks filled the air. Laughter and music spilled out of the open doors. Someone proposed a toast to new beginnings, and I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. Later that night, I slipped outside onto the deck alone. In the distance, the lights of the Denver skyline twinkled. The air was cool and crisp. My phone sat on the railing, its screen dark. This feeling, this peace, it wasn't something I had been given. It was something I had earned. My schedule filled with clients. I walked a military veteran through his first home inspection. I helped a retired teacher downsize into a condo. Each closing felt like I was reclaiming a piece of my own story. At the party, someone noticed the old deadbolt on the wall. "What's the story with that?" they asked. "It's a symbol," I said simply, "a reminder about boundaries." That was enough. They smiled and moved on. Brianna came up beside me and nudged my arm. "You actually did it," she said quietly. The words were simple, but they held the weight of a lifetime. A new routine took root. I went for runs in the morning, exploring my new neighborhood. I filled the house with plants and local art. My neighbors started waving. I was invited for coffee. I was building a community, not by blood or obligation, but by choice. I finally understood that family isn't about the people who share your name. It's about the people who show up, the ones who cheer for your victories, no matter how small. I had to learn that lesson the hardest way possible, but the clarity I gained was worth every painful step. Clean breaks, I discovered, are the ones that heal the fastest. 3 months later, I was eating a sandwich at my desk when a LinkedIn message notification popped up. It was from a man I vaguely recognized from my father's old company holiday parties. "Hey, Clara," the message began. "Long time no see. Just heard Richard packed up and moved to Florida to live with his sister. And Leo is working at a fulfillment center out by the airport. Just thought you might want to know." I read the message, my turkey wrap forgotten. I pictured my father sleeping on a fold-out couch in Aunt Carol's guest room, living under her roof, by her rules. I pictured Leo in a bright yellow safety vest, the beep of his scanner a constant rhythm in a vast, impersonal warehouse. A second message came through. Heard he finally got that bank mess sorted. Out of curiosity, I logged into the Mountain Ridge financial portal. The fraudulent account was there, but now it showed a balance of 0, paid in full. The final payment had come from a retirement account rollover. The lien on their house would be lifted. My credit was clear. I archived the message thread, my cursor hovering over the delete button. Across the street, I watched a delivery truck pull up. 2 workers hopped out, their arms full of boxes, moving with an exhausted urgency. It was the same routine Leo was now living, day in and day out. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt nothing at all. They had made their choices, and these were their consequences. My choices had led me here, to this quiet office, to a life I had built myself. I cleared my browser history and closed my laptop. The message, uninvited and unnecessary, was gone. I had learned that family isn't a line on a birth certificate. It's the person who sits beside you at the closing table, sharing your joy. It's the friend who brings you pizza on moving day. It's a bond forged in mutual respect, not one-sided obligation. When I got home, I dug through an old storage bin until I found it. A small wooden plaque that read, "Home Sweet Home." I grabbed my drill and a level and went outside. The post of my new mailbox was blank and waiting. I carefully screwed the plaque into place, making sure it was perfectly straight. It hung there, steady in the late afternoon sun, a quiet greeting to the world. I was moving forward, and I wasn't looking back.